Hello everyone, welcome to StudyIQ. So we will continue our discussion on history, modern India. From in the last session we have discussed up to Nehru report, right? So we have discussed about Nehru report, Delhi proposals, Simon Commission recommendations, and also the demands of Hindu Mahasabha. Before that, we have talked about arrival of Gandhi, Champaran Satyagraha, Kheda Satyagraha, Ahmedabad Mill Strike, Rowlatt Act, Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, 1919 Government of India Act, Non-Cooperation Movement, Khadar Party, Home Rule League Movement, militant nationalism during 1920s, and what is the ideological rethinking in militant nationalism during 1920s, and which was actually seen in the thoughts of Bhagat Singh, the ideas of Bhagat Singh. And we have discussed about what you mean by true freedom, not only political freedom, social freedom, economic freedom, and also political freedom is required. Okay, so all those things we have discussed. And then we have talked about Simon Commission, Nehru report. So if you remember Delhi proposal, we have discussed the 4 proposals of Mr. Jinnah. Okay, so actually when Simon Commission came, it was actually rejected by the Congress. So British government proposed, or British government asked the Congress to come up with a devolution formula which should be acceptable to all sections of Indians. That means Muslim League, Hindu Mahasabha, and also to princely states. And Congress accepted this challenge, and they appointed Nehru committee with Motilal Nehru committee, and he come up with the Nehru report. And before that, even Muslim League also were ready to join hands with Congress if Congress is ready to accept certain demands of Muslim League. Like Muslim League is now ready to go with Congress position on separate electorate. So if you remember, we have discussed and have made a lot of clarification on this particular thing when we discussed about Lucknow Pact of 1916. I've told you Congress and Muslim League jointly going to take anti-imperialist stand in the Lucknow Pact, which is Tilak-Jinnah Pact. We have discussed already. And I've told you Congress is now ready to accept Muslim League's position on separate electorate. So one thing that need to be understood clearly is Congress is accepting Muslim League's position on separate electorate. Congress is not accepting separate electorate. If that is the statement which is given in the question, it is a standard wrong answer. Congress is never accepting the separate electorate. Congress is in support of joint electorate with reservation for Muslims or reservation for minorities. But here in Lucknow Pact, Congress accepting the Muslim League's position on separate electorate. That means Muslim League is demanding separate electorate, so Congress is okay with it. Now, when it came to Nehru report, now Muslim League have taken this as an opportunity to jointly negotiate with the British along with Congress, and now Muslim League is now ready to accept the Congress position on separate electorate. And Congress position on separate electorate means it's very clear that Congress is not in support of separate electorate. Congress is in support of joint electorate with reservation. Okay, so Muslim League is now ready to accept this joint electorate with the reservation for Muslims. Okay, so Congress is now ready to accept Muslim League is now ready to accept Congress position on separate electorate, but there are certain conditions. The conditions are the Delhi proposals or Jinnah's 4 proposals. So the 4 demands of Muslim League. The first one I've told you already, 1/3 reservation for Muslims in the central province. And the second one, the Muslims should be given reservation even in Muslim majority area also. And I've also discussed with you the rationale or logic behind this. It seems to be illogical and irrational, but there are something serious to be discussed here, and we have already done that discussion why Muslim League is demanding a reservation even in Muslim majority area. Thirdly, we have discussed about creation of new provinces like Northwest frontier provinces. Province should be separated from Punjab and Sindh from Bombay, that we have discussed. Third point, third demand. And fourth is residuary power to be with the province. Now, opposite to this, there are demands from Hindu Mahasabha also. So Hindu Mahasabha demanded there should be reservation for Hindus wherever Hindus are in minority. Then the Hindu Mahasabha argued that there should not be any creation of separate provinces like Sindh or NWFP. Then also Hindu Mahasabha argued that the residuary power to be with the center. Okay, so these are the proposals from Muslim League and also the demands of Hindu Mahasabha. And based on this, and in fact we have to discuss about Nehru report. I've discussed with you that already. The first point is related to dominion status and India to be treated like similar to white colonies like New Zealand and Australia, that we have discussed already. And younger generation of Congress was actually against it, because we are now going to demand Purna Swaraj. So why we need to be considered like white colonies? Okay, so that is actually a question raised by Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, etc. Then federal structure was one of the demand. Okay, and then we have discussed about secularism to be a policy or state policy. So secularism was there. And then we have discussed about fundamental rights. And when we discussed about the significance of Nehru report, I've told you the concept of federal structure, secularism, and this fundamental rights, all these are also enshrined in our constitution. Okay, so this is the base. And then 4 more points that we have discussed in Nehru report is actually contrary to the Muslim League's proposal, except the first one, that the next point is actually there should be a joint electorate with reservation for minorities. Then Nehru report actually rejected the creation of separate provinces of Sindh and NWFP. Also, Nehru report rejected the idea of giving a reservation for Muslims in Muslim majority area. So that was again against the Muslim League. And in Nehru report, the residuary power is actually vested with the center. So Muslim League, the Delhi proposals and the Nehru report is totally against it. So obviously Muslim League is not happy with the Nehru report. So Muslim League went back to its original position on separate electorate. So now they are demanding separate electorate only. So they don't want to go for joint electorate. That means Nehru report is not applicable to or not satisfying the Muslim League. And if you remember, I've told you the British government have come up with the proposal that you can come up with a devolution formula, but it has to be applicable to all sections, including Muslim League, princely states and Hindu Mahasabha. But now it is crystal clear that the Nehru report is not acceptable to Muslim League. So British government actually rejected the Nehru report in that ground. Okay, so Simon Commission recommendations actually rejected by Congress, and now the Muslim League demands are rejected by Nehru report. So Nehru report is actually rejected by Muslim League and obviously British government also. So now Gandhi is going to raise certain demands. Some of the demands are general in nature and some related to rural areas or agriculture and some related to capitalist class also. Okay, like the general demands are reduce the expenditure of army and more press freedom to be given. Okay, and then license to carry weapons, arms, all these are general demands. Reducing land revenue, etc. is related to agriculture. So we will now look into that Gandhi's 11 demands. Okay, so this, in which circumstance it is coming? It is coming during this time when Simon Commission recommendation rejected by Congress and Nehru report is actually rejected by the British government. And in 1929, I have told you already during Lahore session, when Jawaharlal Nehru became the president of Congress, we argued for Purna Swaraj, and 1930 Jan 26 to be celebrated as Indian Independence Day. So now let's quickly look into the demands of Gandhi. So Gandhi's 11 demands. Okay, so Gandhi's 11 demands. I'll discuss the important points here. We don't want to get into the complete details, or whatever is required from prelims and mains point of view we'll discuss here. So the first category is the general demand. So we will discuss 3 general demands here. So first one, as I told you already, reduction of expenditure of army. Okay, so reduction in expenditure on army. Okay, second one, lift restriction on press. Okay, so restriction on press was an issue anytime among the intellectuals. We have already discussed about Vernacular Press Act during the time of Lord Lytton, and when Lord Ripon came, it was repealed. All those things we have already covered, so I'm not getting into that, but this is always an important point: reduction or to lift restriction on press. Okay, and removal of restriction on carrying firearms. Okay, so removal of restriction on carrying firearms. Okay, so these are the three demands which are general in nature. Now we will discuss specific demand. Firstly, keeping peasant issues. Okay, so under specific demands we will firstly talk about issues related to the peasants. So basically most important one will be reduction of land revenue. Okay, so decrease in land revenue demands. Okay, and then strengthening the tenant rights. Okay, so if you remember when we discussed about land reforms, we have in fact covered this discussion already during post-independence discussion. Land reforms, I've told you, firstly we went for abolition of zamindars, okay, or abolition of intermediaries, and then we have discussed about tenancy reforms. There we have actually discussed about strengthening tenancy rights in terms of, you know, regulation of rent. If you remember, we have done this, okay, regulation of rent, and first point in that is actually conferring ownership rights to those occupancy tenants who got the benefit of the first reform, that is after abolition of zamindar. Some occupancy tenants got the rights over the land, and they are conferred with the ownership rights, and those who got the ownership rights, now they started doing exactly the same things that has been already done by the zamindars with those people. So you need to strengthen the tenancy rights. So you came up with regulation of rent, security of tenure, and all those things, and that's what exactly you mean by strengthening tenant rights. Okay, so strengthening tenant rights. Okay, now next we will look into the specific demands which is related to capitalist class. Okay, so the first one, coastal shipping must be reserved for Indians. So coastal shipping must be reserved for Indians, and then increase the customs duty on the imported textile goods. Okay, why increase in custom duty? Because otherwise all these textile goods are dumped in India, and the Indian industries are actually suffering because of that. If you remember, again we have discussed this point, 1813 Charter Act. When we have discussed in 1813 Charter Act, it actually created all these problems, right? Monopoly ended except in two items, that is trade in tea products and trade with China. So when the monopoly ended, what is actually going to happen? More and more companies are now going to come to India, and they are going to dump their products in India. So all these finished products started coming to India. So the life of artisans in India is totally ruined, because you are now competing with the, you know, finished products which are made up with the machines, and Indian products, they are not at all competent with these products, whether in terms of their quality or look, or, you know, the price. Okay, so life of artisans ruined, the small industry suffered, and that ultimately led to deindustrialization in India, because there is no further scope of development of industries when these finished products started coming to India. And if you remember, in that discussion I have already compared during Mughal time, when there was a balance between agriculture and industry, but especially after Charter Act, that balance between agriculture and industry is over. And now if you see why industry is so backward, it is because of this reason. Okay, so increase in custom duties on imported textile goods. Okay, and then there was again a common demand that is related to abolition of salt tax. Very important, because based on this only CDM, civil disobedience movement, is actually starting. So abolition of salt tax. Now what is salt tax? Actually a tax was imposed on manufacturing salt, even for personal consumption. Even for personal consumption, if you're manufacturing salt, that also is taxed. So basically salt tax is the tax imposed on manufacturing of salt for commercial purpose as well as for personal use. And Gandhi called it as evil tax, because, you know, you are even exploiting the poorest of the people. Okay, and Gandhi actually picked up this as the issue to launch civil disobedience movement. Now the reason why this was taken up as the issue is because See, you could have taken land revenue issue also. This also could have been taken by Gandhi to launch a civil disobedience movement. But if it would have been taken, not all sections of population is actually affected by land revenue. Now, if you are taking land revenue as the issue, what will happen is zamindars will be the losers here. You are actually supporting, you'll only get the support of the peasants. So zamindars will be against you, and zamindars is now going to support the British. But since you are taking salt, it is a basic essential commodity which is going to affect all sections of Indians. So if you start a civil disobedience movement on the basis of this, there is no possible social division which you can see, right? Everybody will equally participate or contribute, whether it is peasant or zamindar, upper class, lower class, middle class, whoever it is, they are going to help you, or they are going to contribute in the civil disobedience movement, because there is no social division is possible if you take this as the issue. And that is the reason why Gandhi took up salt issue to launch the civil disobedience movement. Okay, so let me write down that point. Salt was picked as an issue as it affect all, and on which CDM could be launched. Okay, so the first point, salt was a basic commodity. Salt was a basic commodity, and being taxed by the British means affected all Indians. So it affected all Indians. And secondly, there was no socially divisive implication of arguing for abolition of salt tax. Why? Because it is going to affect all sections of Indians. If you would have argued for abolition of land revenue, it will affect the zamindars and they will support the British. Okay, then Gandhi's 11 demands are actually rejected by the British. So during March-April 1930, from Sabarmati Ashram, Gujarat to coastal area of Dandi, Gandhi marched. Okay, so Gandhi wrote a letter to the British government that Gandhi is going to break the salt law, but they actually ignored this letter, and this is part of their wait and watch policy. So during his 1 month of journey, he got a lot of support, and when he reached the coast, so what he did is he took some salt, and it was seen as a symbolic challenge to the might of British Empire, and he broke the salt law, and Gandhi was actually arrested after this. But the similar salt satyagraha is actually launched or started in other parts of the country. So what you need to remember, or what you need to know, is the other important people who started this movement in different parts of the country. So first one, C. Rajagopalachari. He launched it in Madras. Okay, and then Patel in Gujarat. Next is very important person, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, is known as frontier of Gandhi, Gandhian. Okay, so Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, so he was a Gandhian. He was in NWFP, Northwest Frontier Provinces. So he started the organization of Khudai Khidmatgars, red shirts. We have discussed that already. Okay, so and what all things they have done, like in Swadeshi movement or like in non-cooperation movement, the most important one is actually boycott of foreign goods. Okay, so boycott of foreign goods means it's all about promotion of Swadeshi, and when we talk about promotion of Swadeshi, it's all about promoting or trying to achieve self-sufficiency in all walks of life. So you can see promotion of Khadi, and also Indian run schools to be set up. So these are the main things that they're going to do, and here it is also talking about promotion of Swadeshi is promoted. Okay, Swadeshi promoted. Now, most important point that I need to tell you here is, here Gandhi gave a call for no tax campaign. Okay, So no tax campaign. So this point is very important, and this is the reason why it became a civil disobedience movement. So if you remember, I've already discussed with you the difference between civil disobedience movement and non-cooperation movement. See, in case of civil disobedience movement, there is a breaking of law. So you're supposed to pay tax, and you are asked not to pay tax. So Gandhi is asking you not to pay tax. So that is illegal. So you're violating a law. That's why civil disobedience movement. And if you remember, in non-cooperation movement, I've made it clear that neither Gandhi nor Congress gave a call for non-payment of tax. So if they have given a call for non-payment of tax, obviously you're violating a law, and that cannot be non-cooperation movement. That will become a civil disobedience movement, since you're violating a law. Non-cooperation movement means you are just not cooperating with the British, like through boycott of goods, promotion of Swadeshi, and all those things. Okay, but when you are not paying tax, that is illegal. And if you remember, Champaran Satyagraha was the Gandhi's first civil disobedience movement. I told you why. Kheda Satyagraha was Gandhi's first non-cooperation movement. I told you why. And Ahmedabad mill strike was the first hunger strike by Gandhi. And then we have discussed specifically about non-cooperation movement in 1921, and this is the civil disobedience movement. Why it is civil disobedience movement? Because you are not following the rule, you are actually violating the law. So Gandhi gave a call for no tax campaign. If this statement is there in non-cooperation movement, that's a standard wrong answer. In non-cooperation movement, you cannot go for no tax campaign. If you give a call for no tax campaign, it will become a civil disobedience movement. That has to be very clear to all of you. Okay. Now we'll see the significance of this. Actually, large-scale women participation was there, and this was the largest mass movement so far. So when we discussed about Swadeshi movement, at that time that was the largest mass movement, and then we discussed about Home Rule League movement, that was also largest still by far, and then we discussed about non-cooperation movement, that became the largest mass movement till then. Now this is going to be the largest mass movement. Later when we discuss about Quit India movement, that will be the largest mass movement. Okay, so and here largest mass movement till now, and then large scale participation of women. Large scale participation of women. Okay, so this is the significance. I hope this is clear for all of you. If you have any doubt in any of the discussion that we have done so far, you can get in touch with me. This is my Instagram ID, and you can join this Telegram channel. You will get all my videos on history, economics, and some other subject also I have done. So all those videos are available in the Telegram channel. Okay, so see you guys.